I just, because you use the words, no party should take any actions or any actions that are unilaterally in the interests of that other party over the broadest interests of the Syrian people. There's no way that you could then see what Israel's doing that's not a unilateral action in the interest of it.
So first of all, we have made that clear to every party, including the government of Israel. I'm not sure that just to argue with the kind of the logic train that you presented, I'm not sure that increased weapon stockpiles sitting around Syria is necessarily something that's in the interest of the Syrian people.
So you're saying that the destruction of Syrian arms and the Syrian army is actually in the benefit of the Syrian people?
I just want to. That is not what I said. I
so
said
what
that
did you say?
I said this is what the way the government of Israel has explained the actions that they are taking. I was just interrogating, as I said, the logic train of Willie's question.
But you said something akin to, I think that the arms and so on that were used against the Syrian people, that would be to their benefit. That's what you're saying?
That's not what I said.
Just on a point of fact, I mean, you've set out how you can't speak for the Department of Justice and the call for a US-led investigation, but that's not all the family are asking for. And one of the things they want is just some basic information for the State Department to ask the Israelis, for example, for the name of the unit involved, the name of the unit commander, things that they would want in the interest of transparency as American citizens who seen their loved one killed. I mean, are you asking for those things from the Israelis?
So we are asking for the results of their investigation, I would assume, but we'll see when we get the results of that investigation. You would expect that investigation would talk about the unit that was involved as well as the things that have happened. We will see what's actually in that investigation when we get the report from the government of Israel, but what we committed to the family is that we will brief them as soon as we get those answers.
Some of these things are quite basic things that aren't the result of an investigation. I mean, knowing the unit involved is a very basic piece of information.
I hear you,
they don't even know that the US could ask the Israelis now.
I hear you, but look, they're in the middle of an investigation, well, I shouldn't say in the middle, they're near the end of an investigation where we expect that they're going to come to us and brief us on the results of that investigation. And if we don't get satisfactory answers to the questions that we have asked of them, of course we will continue to press them for more information. Saeed, is there something you'd like to share with the rest of the class over there?
I'm looking at the ministers that are being appointed to run Syria. So maybe you ought to take a second look at that.
Maybe on silent mode, not for the rest of us.
Yeah. To continue, do you have any sympathy with an American family who look at this situation and, in their view, see differential treatment? Because, here you have an American that's been killed by a strong ally of the United States, which is armed by the United States. Those weapons go into the West Bank. They go into the use of live ammunition against civilian protests in the West Bank. And yet they believe that nothing is being done. They said they walked out of that meeting today and felt no further sense of optimism after the meeting with the Secretary. Do you have any sympathy with that?
Of course we have sympathy for the family. And the Secretary said that directly to the family. And if you heard the Secretary's public comments, not just what he said privately to the family, but you all heard his public comments after she was killed, when he made clear that her death was unacceptable, that it was an avoidable tragedy, that it was something that should not have happened and should not happen again, and that we will demand answers from the government of Israel. And we are demanding answers from the government of Israel. Now, we also respect that when there is an ongoing investigation, it's appropriate to get those answers at the end of that investigation, not in the middle. That's the same thing our law enforcement agencies and our military would do, by the way, if they were responsible for the death of a citizen of another country. They would complete an investigation and then talk about what they found when that investigation ended, not when they were in the middle of it. Now, if we don't get appropriate answers to the questions that we have put to the government of Israel when we're briefed on the outcome of that investigation, we will absolutely go back and demand more. We 100% understand why Aysenur's family is demanding answers and is demanding accountability, and so are we. We are doing it on her behalf, and will continue to do so. And I cannot in any way imagine the tragedy that they have had to go through, and I would be every bit as angry as they are if I were in their shoes.
I guess their frustration is about of course, what they see as the absolute injustice of her being killed by a military force while she's at a civilian protest. Not just that, but about the fact that she was an American citizen, and they don't see their own government, in their view, doing enough.
I am in no way going to quarrel with anything that they have said, because if I were in their shoes, I would absolutely be demanding accountability, and I would be pressing my government for answers as well, and they were absolutely right to do so. And what I can tell you is that we are demanding accountability. We are pressing the government of Israel for answers, and as soon as we have those answers, as soon as that investigation is complete, we will provide them to her family.
Okay, and it's just that then goes to the wider issue, which is, and again, the attorney for the family says this: we have been here so many times before, Shireen Abu Akleh, Rachel Corrie, Omar Assad, where American citizens killed by the Israeli military, and you have said the same things. You've said we'll wait for the outcome of the investigation. In the case of Shireen Abu Akleh, in the end, you said that you've got the Israelis to change their rules of engagement. But here we see live ammunition used against a civilian protest in a village that has seen their land taken away by an illegal settlement outpost. So they say this is systematic. This, the use of live ammunition against civilians, and it's been going for a very long time. This is your ally that you arm, and still nothing changes.
And we have made clear to them the outcome was unacceptable. We have made clear to them that they need to look at their rules of engagement, and we will continue to press that with them. Thank you.
United Nations Special Envoy for Syria, Patterson, has called for ending the sanctions on Syria to facilitate reconstruction. Is the United States prepared to support their efforts in the United Nations Security Council? And do you have any meetings to preview?
I don't have anything to preview today with respect to any of the sanctions that we, as the United States or other entities, have imposed on either the government of Syria, the former Syrian regime, or with respect to HTS as a terrorist organization. But we have made clear the principles that we want to see the transition process and a new government adhere to. And before we make any kinds of decisions about recognition or about lifting sanctions, we want to see their actions actually adhere to those principles. We want to see them take actions on behalf of the Syrian people. And we're going to make our decisions when it comes to sanctions posture, when it comes to recognition posture, when it comes to all the tools in our toolbox, based on what we see from HTS and other actors on the ground in Syria.
But given some of the conditions on the ground has changed in Syria, including some of the ground conditions stipulated in the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2254 has changed. Is it fair to say the U.S. is open to lifting economic sanctions?
We are going to make our decisions on economic sanctions based on the decisions by the interim authorities in Syria. If they change, if they pursue, look, let me say it this way. Our sanctions are never meant to be permanent. We always impose sanctions to try to induce changes of behavior. And if we see changes of behavior, of course, we are open to lifting our sanctions. And you've seen that in the past when when various governments have changed their behavior, and we have lifted sanctions in response to those changes in behavior. That's true in Syria as it is anywhere in the world.
I have a quick one on Ukraine, if I may.
Yeah.
Do you have anything on the what Ukraine said that North Korean soldiers casualty in Kursk, and then what happened if those North Korean soldiers cross the border to Ukraine? Are they becoming a legitimate target?
So, in our view, the North Korean soldiers who were deployed to Kursk are already legitimate targets. They entered a war, and they are, as such, combatants and are legitimate targets for the Ukrainian military. We have seen North Korean soldiers who have been killed in action on the battlefield inside Russia. And if they were to cross the border into Ukraine, that would be yet another escalation by the government of Russia, and also an escalation by the government of North Korea to send North Korean troops to prosecute a war of aggression against an independent sovereign nation inside that nation's borders. That would absolutely be an escalation by the government of North Korea.
Is China responding to the U.S. ask to use their influence to curb the military cooperation between Russia and North Korea?
I'm not going to get into the conversations that we have had with the government of China. Ultimately, China can speak to whether they have appropriately used that influence or not, but I would say that there is certainly more that they can do with respect to encouraging Russia not to take not just this escalatory action, but the long series of actions that they have taken. Yeah.
Thank you. On Serbia, I have a question. Amnesty International said on Monday in a report that Serbian officials installed homegrown spyware on the phones of dozens of journalists and activists. How concerning is this for the U.S., which considers Serbia as a partner?
So I can't speak to that report. I'm not in any position to verify it, but just speaking broadly, we have made quite clear since the outset of this administration the concerns that we have about governments that use spyware to track journalists, to track dissident groups, to track track others who legitimately oppose or report on government activities. And you have seen the United States take action to stop the use of that spyware. But as it comes to this specific report, I can't speak to it. Danny.
Thank you, Matt. Excuse me. Applications of South Korea and Russia and North Korea. Due to the impeachment, South Korean President Yoon's duties have been suspended. Do you think there will be a gap to U.S. South Korea foreign policy and security sectors established by President Biden and
no, yeah. There will be no diminution in the alliance between the United States and the Republic of Korea. That alliance is not just an alliance between presidents, it is an alliance between governments and an alliance between peoples. And our commitment to that alliance remains ironclad. We have seen the Republic of Korea over the past few weeks demonstrate its democratic resilience. That is democratic resilience that was hard won several decades ago. And we've seen them follow peacefully a process that was laid out by the Republic of Korea's constitution, and we are ready to continue to work with the acting president and the government of the Republic of Korea in the same way that we were acting and cooperating with President Yoon.
And also North Korea and Russia made military cooperation publicly. What is the United States response to North Korea and Russia's, what is Russia's actualization of military cooperation? Do you, regarding this issue, be sanctions against?
So you have seen the United States just today oppose additional sanctions to disrupt military cooperation between the DPRK and Russia. We also, in the recent days, issued a foreign ministerial joint statement with the G7, and we will continue to take appropriate measures to address our concerns with that unprecedented cooperation.
Thank you.
Yeah, changing region very quickly. Do you have any? There was a devastating hurricane or cyclone in Mayotte, in the Indian Ocean, French territory. We don't know the number of casualties. It's very complicated and all that, but certainly devastating cyclone. Does the U.S. intend or have any assets that you could forward or that you're willing to forward to the region, or any contacts in particular that you might have?
So I will say that, first of all, we offer our deepest condolences to those who have been affected by this deadly cyclone, and we do stand ready to offer appropriate humanitarian assistance. And as to details, I have to take it back and get that for you, Leon. Alex.
Thank you, Matt. Going back to the question of North Korean soldiers in Kursk, you said that if they cross the border, that will be escalation. Can you define what you mean by escalation? What kind of reaction would that invite from you?
An escalation means precisely that, Alex. It means it would be an escalation. We have already seen North Korea and Russia escalate this conflict by deploying North Korean soldiers in the first place to Russia. It would be a further escalation to then send them onward to fight inside the borders of a sovereign country. As to what the United States might do, as to what our allies and partners who also support the government of Ukraine and in this conflict, I'm not going to preview that publicly, obviously.
Thank you. Over the weekend, we heard the president spoke with G7 leadership, and he called G7 leaders to, quote-unquote, seize and unlock the full value of Russian frozen assets. Can you just clarify, is it the first time you guys are raising this issue? Secretary was in Italy a couple of weeks ago. Why waiting till the very last moment?
It's something that we have been working on privately with our allies and partners for any number of months. Sometimes we feel the best way to move the ball forward is to speak privately to a matter. Sometimes we feel there's added value to speaking to it publicly. I think I'll leave it at that.
And on Georgia, I have a couple of questions on Georgia. I want to get your reaction to what we have been seeing lately around Georgian president. There's a literally coup going on, Russian back, to replace her. Do you have any reaction?
So I'm not going to speak to that specifically, other than to say that we have been greatly concerned about the state of Georgian democracy, the actions that Georgia Dream has taken to undermine Georgia democracy. You saw us just on Friday impose 20 new visa restrictions on individuals affiliated with the government who have been responsible for undermining democracy in the country, and we will have other actions that we're prepared to take in the coming weeks.
On the visa restrictions, you guys have it like two previous packages of visa restrictions that did not help.
Alex, we're not done. As we made clear in that statement, we have other sanctions that we are preparing to unfold in the coming weeks.
But there are criticism, coming from the Hill, saying that you are demoralizing protesters out there on the city. They've been out there for 3 weeks now.
We could not be more clear, including a statement from Secretary Blinken week before last and a statement from me on Friday, that we are preparing an additional sanctions package that we will roll out in the coming weeks. Now, these are not things, in many cases, that you can do overnight. You have to make sure you get the letter of the law right when you roll out these sanctions, and that's what we're working on doing even as we speak.
Any concern you're giving an...
What's that?
You always say you don't preview sanctions.
We make rare exceptions.
Any concern matter that you're giving some impression to Ivanish that you can get away with what he's doing?
I think that should be, Alex, I don't know how many times to say it, when we have said exactly what you have been asking us to impose sanctions on the government of Georgia. When I come out here and tell you that we're preparing to impose sanctions, I don't think it could be any more clear. Jenny, you'll come back to your... Yeah.
Do you have any updates as the landing team here? Has there been any communication between the State Department?
Yeah, we have had communication with the incoming administration's agency review team. They have appointed members of the agency review teams, action that they took last week. I will let them speak to the identities of those members, but we are having initial conversations with them this afternoon here at the State Department about the path forward. We will reiterate to them, as we have been reiterating publicly for some time, that we stand ready to do everything that we can to support a successful transition.
Is that more of a policy-focused conversation, more logistical?
So the initial meeting always, and I can tell you I've worked on 2 transitions, always the initial meeting of this nature is more of a logistics question, because people come in and they want to know that they want to know what resources are available to them. They want to map out a series of meetings. Oftentimes they have requests for information that they put to the incoming administration, and they will prioritize what is most important. So this is an initial meeting about how the process should unfold over the coming weeks. And then what usually follows that, and what we have said we are ready to do with them, is to as the incoming administration identifies its policy leads in different areas, to engage with them so they understand the actions that we have taken on various policies, what may be pending, things that we expect to happen either between now and the end of the administration, and then in some cases work that is ongoing on January 20th, because for all the all the focus on what we'll do in the next few weeks, the vast majority of the work of government are things that just continue, things that are in process that continue and get handed over. And so you'd like to brief the incoming administration on what those are so they can be ready to take decisions.
Conversations or meetings between the Secretary and Senator Rubio?
So the last phone conversation they had, they agreed that they would meet in person. I don't have a date to provide for that meeting, but when it does happen, we'll of course make it public.
Can I just ask a one-off on the drones over the skies of New Jersey and Pennsylvania? I know that's probably a DOD, DHS, but is there any indication this is the work of like a foreign entity or adversary from the State Department perspective?
I don't have any assessment at all to offer from the State Department. As far as I'm aware, this is entirely a law enforcement matter, and a law enforcement and Pentagon matter. So I would refer to DHS and DOD to speak to it. You go to. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions on Syria, but first I want to ask a quick question about Secretary's meeting with Ayşenur Ezgi today. Mm-hmm. Is there a reason why this meeting was not included in the Secretary's public schedule today?
Usually we don't make meetings with private individuals public on the Secretary's schedule. We put meetings, there are exceptions that we put meetings with foreign governments. We put meetings with organizations. But in the past, when the Secretary has met with private individuals, we don't put it on his schedule. That said, and we also try to respect the wishes of the family, who don't always want the meetings to be public, and we don't talk about meetings if the family doesn't want us to talk about them. But then when we have meetings that they are comfortable with us speaking to, I'm free, as I am in this case, to come out and speak to it publicly.
Okay, one more on Syria, please. A couple more on Syria. Secretary Blinken said in Ankara last week that there is a broad agreement with Turkey and the US on Syria. I wonder, is that include the northeast Syria, because you have a major disagreement because of the US's support for the YPG, which Turkey considers the Syrian branch of the PKK, a designated terror group by both the US and Turkey.
So this continues to be an extremely delicate and extremely difficult issue that we are working on with our Turkish counterparts, and it was the conversation. It was a large part, not all, but a large part of the conversation between Secretary and his Turkish counterparts. Is when it was, of course, a conversation at the meetings in Aqaba over the weekend. Look, we understand Turkey's legitimate right to go after a designated terrorist organization, which the United States considers a terrorist organization as well. We
consider the YPG.
I'm speaking with respect to the PKK.
YPG is widely accepted, considered as the Syrian branch of the PKK.
I understand. We have designated the PKK, and we respect their right to go after that organization. I will just say what we have made clear to all the parties that we have engaged in on this issue, that Syria is in such a fragile state right now that we don't want to see any party take an action to pursue their own unilateral interests over the broader interests of the Syrian people. That this is a time to increase stability, not to further devolve into sectarian fighting. And in addition, the SDF does incredibly important work in the counter-ISIS coalition, a coalition of which Turkey, of course, is a member. It is in the interests of the United States, it's in the interest of Turkey, it's in the interest of the Syrian people and all the countries in the region that ISIS not rear its head again, that the ISIS fighters who are being held in SDF custody not be released. And so we're going to continue to work through that. It is an extremely difficult issue, but we're going to continue to engage with our Turkish counterparts. I suspect it's something we'll be talking to them about this week.
It's an important partner in the fight against ISIS or Daesh, I might say. But Turkey has been telling you that, if you want to fight ISIS, work with us instead of, using one terror group against the other. And Turkey is your NATO ally. Why don't you work with your NATO ally instead of a group that your NATO ally designates as a terror group?
So we have been discussing this with our NATO ally and trying to come to the best path forward. But as I said, even considering Turkey's very legitimate national security interests at this delicate time, what we are trying to avoid is Syria devolving once again into sectarian fighting. Just came through the collapse of a regime that presided over a brutal, years-long civil war, and we don't want to see any actions that would further destabilize the situation and further lead to the suffering of the Syrian people.
Does it include the actions by Israel?
We have made clear to all parties that we want to see actions that promote stability, not promote instability. Every party in the region. Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Because you use the words, no party should take any actions or any actions that are unilaterally in the interests of that other party over the broadest interests of the Syrian people. There's no way that you could then see what Israel's doing that's not a unilateral action in the interest of it.
So first of all, we have made that clear to every party, including the government of Israel. I'm not sure that just to argue with the kind of the logic train that you presented, I'm not sure that increased weapons stockpiles sitting around Syria is necessarily something that's in the interest of the Syrian people at the end of a brutal civil war when they have seen those weapons stockpiles turned on their own people.
What about the territory that is being invaded by Israel that is the buffer zone.
And we have made quite clear that we believe that action ought to be temporary. Israel has said, and they can speak for themselves, that they took the action because they saw the Syrian army withdraw from that buffer zone, and it created a vacuum that could be filled by terrorist groups. They have said it's temporary. They can speak for themselves. We have made clear that we believe it also ought to be temporary.
In Washington later today, the Syrian embassy is raising the opposition flag. My understanding is you guys signed off on that.
I have seen that reporting. I don't know what it comes from. We don't control that building. We don't control the operations that happen there. So the raising of a flag decision is made by the Syrian permanent representative to the United Nations.
And you haven't recognized that new flag?
We have not, no. We have not. Tom, come back to you.
There's no change in status of the Syrian embassy in Washington, D.C.
No, there is not.
I think there's probably an erroneous kind of thing that's circulating online suggesting it could be reopening, but I mean, this obviously won't happen. So.
No change. Humera, go ahead. Yeah.
So you're saying that the destruction of Syrian arms and the Syrian army is actually in the benefit of the Syrian people? I just want to.
That is not what I said. I
so
said
what
that
did you say on
this? I said this is what the way the government of Israel has explained the actions that they are taking. I was just interrogating, as I said, the logic train of Willie's question.
But you said something akin to, I think that the arms and so on that were used against the Syrian people, that would be to their benefit. That's what you're saying?
That's not what I said. Go ahead, Humera.
Just on SDF and Turkey-backed SNA fighters, the United States brokered a ceasefire between them last week, largely focusing on Manbij. That seems to have ended today. Could you first confirm that and tell us if there are any U.S. efforts to extend it?
So I can't confirm that, but what I can say is that we continue to engage in very intense diplomacy with all the parties in the region, the parties in northern Syria, our Turkish allies, about anything that we can do to increase stability in northern Syria. And as I said, try and avoid any actions that would lead to the SDF being distracted from their important fight against ISIS. Right. I'm not. I get the point of the question, but I'm just not going to get into the underlying details. I can just tell you it's something that we are actively engaged in, without saying more.
This seems to be a short-term ceasefire thing. Is the U.S. involved? Are your conversations also targeted towards achieving something more permanent between those parties there?
So in the immediate term, we want to see the situation stabilize. Long term, of course, we want to see a Syrian government established that has full control of the entirety of its territory, that governs in a way that is inclusive of all the organizations, all the various ethnic groups inside Syria. But obviously, we're a long way from that today. Nick, go ahead, and then we'll wrap today.
Question. There was a report that the U.S. would raise a new Syrian flag over the embassy here in D.C. Is that accurate?
No. So I was referring to that somewhat. It's not an action that the United States approved. We don't have control of that facility. It's not a facility that is under our control. We don't decide what flags are raised or lowered there. That is a facility that, to my understanding, is controlled by Syria's permanent representative to the United Nations, and they make those decisions. So with that, wrap for today. Oh, yeah, go ahead. One more. Sorry, one more.
Quickly, on the in Syria, the Israeli military's actions in Syria, is there any concern on the part of the U.S. that this could interfere with the search for Austin Tice or perhaps harm Austin Tice? There's some reporting now that the family has reached out to Netanyahu's office to request that they pause operations.
I'm not aware of those conversations. I can't speak to any concerns that we have about it. But obviously, we continue to be intensely focused on trying to find him and return him home. Thanks, everyone.